So in Parshas Emor, we have the mitzvah of Sefiras, okay, that we're in the middle of. And you have the strange pasuk, Usfartem lechem mimachar hashabos, miyom aviyachem esomer atnufa, sheva Shabbos esmer tzien. And Chazal said, you know what Shabbos is? It's Pesach, right? Well, it's the first day of Pesach. Now, the Tzedukim and the Baisusim, right, the followers of Tzadok and Baisus, who are sometimes encapsulated in the common term, the minim, right, they said, no, Shabbos is Shabbos. Mimachar Shabbos means Sunday. Okay, now this turned out to be a very big hikuach in the Gemara, a very big argument that takes on a lot of dimensions, and we're going to see how Rav Moshe Shapira explains that this is really key to our understanding of Torah and who and what we are. Okay, so it tells us, it describes the argument here on in Menachos Samachayom at Aleph, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, right, said to the Baisusim, he said, "Shoitim minayin lachem." These fools, where do you get this from that you say that Mimachar Shabbos means Sunday? So he says, Adam echad shoyim meshira. Nobody wanted to tackle Rabbi Yochanan. Chutz mizokin echad shoyim mefatpet kenegdo. Aside from one old guy that was mefatpet. Mefatpet's a lashon of like, babbling. He didn't say something serious, but this is what he said. Amar Moshe Rabbeinu oiv Yisrael. Says Rabbi, Moshe Rabbeinu loved Am Yisrael. V'yodeh she'atzeres yom echad. And he knows that Shavuos is just one day, right? So he said, who amad, sorry, what's the Bach? Change it here. Says, Lafikach, therefore, right? Who amad v'tikna achar Shabbos kadeshu Yisrael misangim shnei yom. His argument was, he says, listen, Moshe Rabbeinu loved Am Yisrael. Shavuos is like a one-day yontiv, right? For those who aren't keeping 2 days in its original state, one day. It's a very strange thing. We build up to it 49 days. You get the house all set up, you cook, you do all these things, bang, it's over before you finish. One day of Shavuos. So he said, Moshe Rabbeinu, therefore, for sure would want it to come out on a Sunday, so you could have a long weekend. You have Shabbos, and then you have Shavuos. That was his argument. Rabbi Yochanan said to him, right, he said, the Koral of Mikrazeh, Rabbi Yochanan quoted a pasuk to him, Achad Asur Yomei Achoriv Derech Harseyah. He says, Am Yisrael were very close to Eretz Yisrael. If Moshe Rabbeinu oiv Yisrael, and if Moshe Rabbeinu loved Yisrael, Lama Yichon Bamidbar Arba'im Shana. Right? Why did he keep him in the Midbar for 40 years? Okay, again, so this Tzeduki says to him, he says, Rabbi Bekachata Potreni, right? He says, this is how you're answering me. And it goes on, and then the different Rabbanim step up and bring the different proofs as to how we know that Mimachar Shabbos is after Pesach. Okay? So this little vignette, what you call, is something which is very, very key and something we have to take seriously in order to get to the root of what was motivating the Tzedukim by Susim and what is different with us, and the fact that it has to do with Kabbalah Satorah. Meaning the fact that this conflict happened in terms of when the Torah is going to be received. Is Shavuos always going to be on a Sunday giving you a long weekend? Or Shavuos going to come out on whatever day it comes out after the Sheva Shabbosos Tamimos? He says this is a big key. This is not a little detail. So let's try to explain why. Okay. First of all, Rabbi Shapira says it's strange that Rabbi Yochanan even gets into this argument with the Tzeduki, because it says in Sanhedrin, Lamed Ches, Rabbi Lezer Omer, have a shokot lilmod Torah v'dam asher toshiv la'apikaris. Says you should be diligent to learn Torah and know what to answer in apikaris. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, right? I was saying Rabbi Yochanan. He says, Lo shanu el apikaris akol. It's only talking about an apikaris who's a non-Jew, who's like denying Torah, etc. But apikaris to soil, a Jewish apikaris, kol shekain the pocket tzvei. He's going to just get worse if you get involved in arguments with him. So why is it Rabbi Yochanan here decided to do so? So he says the Rambam in his Akdama, right, his famous Akdama to Mishnah Torah, he goes through the 40 generations from Moshe Rabbeinu until Rav Ashi, who completed the Talmud Bavli, right? And he goes through the people who were commanded to pass on the Masorah. And this is the way the Rambam writes it. He says, "V'li Yoshua shu talmido shemoshe Rabbeinu Mosar Torah shebal peh v'tzivohu aleh." So to Yoshua was Moshe Rabbeinu's Talmud. Moshe gave him Torah shebal peh, and he commanded him about it. And the Kesef Mishnah says, "Kavona somra." What does it mean? V'tzivohu aleh. Hainu shuhuya rosh machzike haTorah v'nischayev la'avira midor. Meaning, in every generation there was a person who was in charge of ensuring the integrity of Torah, the Masorah of Torah. And he says Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was that person in the generation of the Tzedukim by Susim. And because what they were doing was impacting the integrity of Torah itself, therefore he stepped up and he had to fight them. Okay? So now, what is it that we have a name, we have a description of what this by Susi was doing? Rashi brings it in a few places, right, about these people, the minim, as they were called, as for what they were doing. So he says, one second, that minus, here, minus, he says, Osama ofchim tamei Torah l'midrash toos ve'elil, or ve'alil. It's those who turn the reasoning of Torah into midrashim that are mistaken, and elil, right, we're going to see how he explains it. Elil means something which is dwarfed, something which is constricted, like if Kel, that name of Hashem, represents the all-powerful, Elil means something which has been diminished, right? A diminutive, a power, but a power which has been diminished.
They kind of like how they say Yehudale.
Correct, exactly. That is
like a little high.
Like my name Feivel, initially it's five-ish in Yiddish, and it turns to Feivel as a diminutive, like. It's so, they say the five-ish is related to the Greek Phoebus, the god of fire, because it usually goes together. Shraga Feivel, Shraga in Aramaic is a candle. Feivel in Yiddish is a candle, five-ush, fire. And an Arab once told me that the word for candle in Arabic is sraj, like shraga in Aramaic. So it's...
You're wrong.
It's shraga, yeah.
Candle.
Shraga, that name, right? Shraga b'tira mayahani. Okay, so the question is, obviously, in this argument, let's just go back in this argument again, right? The Tzedukim by Susim were saying, and they made a big deal out of this, that Machar Shabbos, the Sefiras Omer, has to start after Shabbos Bereshis, okay, after a Saturday, which means that Shavuos is always going to come out on Sunday. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai,
Bereshis?
Well, what we call, meaning from the 7 days of Bereshis, that Shabbos. So, oh, very good. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said to them, Shotim, fools, where do you get this from? And the Zokin Echad, this old by Susi, came up and he said, here's why. He says, Moshe Rabbeinu loved Am Yisrael. And he knows Shavuos is just 1 day. So, of course, he would set it up that they should have Shavuos on Sunday after Shabbos. You have 2 days of Oneg. You have a long weekend. That should be. And Rabbi Yochanan answers him, oh, really? Well, Am Yisrael was so close to Eretz Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu made them go around for 40 years. So, obviously, the argument was Moshe Rabbeinu a nice guy who loved Am Yisrael? Was he mean to Am Yisrael? Something much bigger is going on. Okay, so what's happening is this. Our Sefira is a creation of a period of time. Sheva Shabbosos Tamimos Tiana. The fact that those 7 weeks of Sefira are Tamimos. It's a whole creation. And it comes out on whatever week it comes out. It can come out on a Sunday, right? But it can end up finishing with Shavuos on all sorts of other days. And however, if you decide that the count goes according to the regular natural days of the week that we have from Bereshis, Yom Shvi, Shabbos, and that's the system of the world. And what happens at the end of the counting, Matan Torah? So the question is the system of Torah that we received in approaching Matan Torah an entirely different system than just the regular natural system of the world? Or do you view Torah? Now he said it's a very strange Yetzer Hara that's so documented by Susim Het. They didn't deny the divine origin of Torah, right? They said, yeah, God gave the Torah, but we want to interpret it our way. Okay, it's a very strange Yetzer Hara. And they were very strict about what they decided, but they decided it in their way. So he said, if it comes to connect to the regular week and to improve a regular Sunday to Saturday week, that means you view the purpose of Torah as simply to improve my life in this world. Okay? Which is how many, many people view the concept of, let's say, religion in general, but certainly Judaism. Many people say, I love the Jewish traditions. It adds so much to my life. It adds color, it adds flavor, it adds Sefiras, it's good for family, etc. And the way that's approaching it is, there's life, and that's life. But life is missing a little something. Life is missing some spirituality. Life is missing some, special events. So that's what Judaism can do for me. It can improve my life. That's the Tzeduki picture of things. Okay, whereas Am Yisrael is saying that Torah was given to Am Yisrael to step into a different system, to live in a different system within this world, but in which the rules governing us are things that are entirely from Torah, and that we're mevatel ourselves to the Torah, and with that we perform everything we perform in this world. So it's two entirely different ways of approaching Torah. Again, I'll just give you two examples of this. One is something that Moshe Shapira would say often. He said, people often parrot the phrase, they say, only human beings have koach habechira, power of choice. Animals don't have the power of choice. Now, he said, if people spend some time with animals, you realize that they're choosing. You have a dog, and the dog loves to bark at the postman, and the dog loves to get his food. And one day, it happens to be that just as the postman comes up, you put the dog's food in his dish. You see the poor dog trying to make his decision. Food, postman, food, postman, food, postman. Eventually, he's going to make a choice. Right? Which one does he want to do? He said, L'maisa, most of our choices are like that. He said it so elegantly in Hebrew. He said, Rov habchirot shalanu b'chaim mistakmot b'sheila hagolalit of o shnitzel. Right? Meaning in weddings, a lot of times, right, you have the waiter comes by and you're already looking at the tray and he's going to ask you, do you want chicken or do you want schnitzel? He said, that's really the type of most of our decisions in life, right? Do I want this or do I want that? And that's not really different from a decision made in the animal kingdom. He says the bechira that Am Yisrael makes is the bechira that then branches out into all, is to live by a different system. To live by something which is an entirely different system. That's the idea of Torah, of chayolam nata b'suchin, right? So, and that, he says, is the true decision that a human being can make. So another example of this, a beautiful answer to something, the pasuk just preceding Matan Torah. It says, "Vaydaber Elokim eskol dvarim ha'ele Emor." Hashem said all of these things, saying, Rashi brings down from Chazal, what does it mean he said all of these things? That he said the entire Torah in one utterance, something that our mouths can't utter and our ears can't hear. So the question is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did this supernatural thing that we can't process. What's the point of doing it? Right? We have no concept of what it would have sounded like. The entire Torah being transmitted in one simultaneous utterance. So I heard an answer once that before we get the Torah, which is there in words and sentences and objects and contents and the things that we know in our life, you got to first realize that this is something coming from above into this world. This is not something of this world. This is not something which is part of this world. The Torah itself was there before the world, and now it's coming into your world in words and sentences and actions that you can interpret, but don't forget that it's an entirely different way of life, right? It's something which is there that comes down. So this is the question. Is Torah, something, and like sometimes they would phrase it in these conventions for the kids, NCSY, I can read it. Are you an American Jew or a Jewish American? Right? Meaning, is my essence, I'm an American, but I'm a Jewish American. That's my flavor. Or are you a Jew, who happens to be living in America, and that makes you an American Jew. Right? It's really, these type of things are similar flavor. Similar. In the beginning of Bamidbar, right? So it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke to Moshe, Be'echad la'shana ha'shenis, la'chodesh ha'sheni b'shana ha'shenis, and he spoke to him B'midbar Sinai b'ol moed. I think we mentioned this once. The Rechaim HaKadosh says that time and space are supposed to be parallel. But here we find in that first pasuk in Bamidbar that they go in opposite orders. That the date goes from specific to general, day, month, year, but the location goes from general to specific. Midbar Sinai to Ohel Moed. He says, why would they be out of sync like that? And he answers, guess what? They are in sync. Because Ohel Moed is the specific, is the general, and Midbar Sinai is the specific. So he says, you're going to ask me, wait a second. We know the dimensions of the Mishkan. It was way smaller than Midbar Sinai. It sat plunk in the middle of Midbar Sinai. How can you say that that's the general? He says, because you're forgetting what's inside the Mishkan. The Aram, with the Torah, with the Luchos. Everything that's outside is a projection from within Torah, so to speak. The world exists within Torah. It's not Torah exists within the world. Okay? So that is another formulation of the same thing. So he says this is the danger of what happens. When it says that the minim, they're hofech tamei Torah, the medrash toes, to mistaken midrashim ve'elil. Right? It's strange. What is the elil doing in there to an idol? So again, he says the idea of kel aleph lamed means power, the all-powerful. Elil means you diminish something, and you shrink it into something. Yes, this Judaism, this Torah is powerful, but it's my tool. It's here to do what I want. Okay, and that is, and therefore the Midrashim, the way they would darshan the Torah, would be to come out that way. Right, again, forgive me for mentioning it if it's this, I saw something written by a person who was trying to deal with the fact that we had just recently in the Torah that relation between two males is forbidden, which is really not in style nowadays to say such a thing. And he said, well, people are forgetting that it says in the beginning of the Torah, Lo tov ve'yosa adam levado. Right? He says, it says a man should not be alone, and that came in Breshit, which was even before that. It's an example of this idea of, right? In other words, a person can say, and you should have sympathy for a person who's in such a situation, etc. But don't start these drushas, right? Which he says, these are drushas of toes. They're totally mistaken. And Elil, right, then you're taking the vast Torah. Torah is something infinite. Hashem is Ein Sof, and the Torah is Ein Sof. The Torah is infinite. And here, what you're doing when you approach Torah this way is you're making Torah something limited. Okay? It's very important that we remember, and therefore everything that relates to Torah in that way. A human being can be diminished, that we forget the greatness of what a human being is and what a human being can accomplish. Whereas eternamental, human being is it's an organism, it's a creature, it's more advanced than this one, it's less than that one. Eretz Yisrael, right, is, he said, not just the territory of Eretz Yisrael, but the very concept of Eretz Yisrael. To turn it into simply the Jewish homeland, right, our national something or other, says Eretz Yisrael is something which is huge. The whole concept of Eretz Yisrael, the very nature of Eretz Yisrael, the fact that so much of the Torah has to take place in Eretz Yisrael. If you just treat it like that, you're shrinking it, right? Even the Lashon HaKodesh, right? Every word in legitimate Lashon HaKodesh has meaning upon meaning upon meaning. I remember years ago, I spoke, I was learning in Yeshiva HaKotel in the old city. The Rosh Yeshiva was Rosh Hadari Zatzal. And he was a master of many things. And also, Rav Hadari, his name was Rav Hadari. And it hit me just in Rosh Hashanah, we say before Tkiyas, the pasuk, Arov Avda Cholatov. And I realized that those three letters, Ayin Resh Bet, have so many different meanings in Torah. There's Erev, which means evening. There's an Orev, which is like a cosigner, someone who takes responsibility for you. There's La'arbev, is to mix things up, right? And I asked him about this, and he said, correct. He said, that's why every translation really diminishes Torah, because, all these things, without getting into even the mystical things, more the gematria of the word and the way you can spell out the letters and the permutations of the letters, etc., which are things that Chazal deal with. So just treating it as a language and then starting to play with the language, right, to make different things out of it and to make different words. I remember one example he gave of a word in modern Hebrew that he said is just not in sync with who we are. The word used in modern Hebrew to convince someone is l'shachnea. L'shachnea. Now he says, what does that word mean? For a person to be nichna means to surrender. He says, do you realize what a brutal word that is for convincing someone? You make him surrender, right? It's like you're beating him until he surrenders. He said, that's not a legitimate Torah concept as to how you would, so to speak, convince a person of something. So many things like that, if we come and we take it and we treat it that way, Tanakh itself, everything there, Tanakh cannot be related to simply a history book. Right? Obviously, right, we see that the Torah chose to write, and the Nevi'im, only those things what Chazal call Nevuah Tzricha L'Doros, and Nevuah that's necessary for generations. Right? Didn't tell us what David HaMelech had for breakfast every day. Why? Because we didn't need to know. They refer to constantly in Tanakh and his wars and this and that. Aloim Ksuvim al Sefer Divrei Hayomim L'Malchi Yehuda. If you want to know, right, everything he did and his treaty with that one and his war with that one and all of his things, that's written in the history books of Malchi Yehuda, which we don't have. But that's where that stuff went. What goes into Tanakh are things which are eternal, right, are things which are there. There's a brilliant statement from Rebellion Meir Bloch. Rebellion Meir Bloch was from Tel, and he managed to escape to America before Telz was wiped out. He started the Telz Yeshiva in Ohio. He said that he felt that Torah Judaism, whatever you want to call it, from Judaism, Yeshiva Judaism or something, that they overcompensated in a few areas to the extent that it almost gets silly. He said, what were those three? He said, Lashon HaKodesh, Eretz Yisrael, and Tanakh. He said, because people in the time of the Haskalah and all these things, they emphasized, we're going to take the Hebrew language as something that's, going to be central and important. They say that once some Maskilim were talking to the Netziv of Volozhin, and they were amazed that the Netziv of Volozhin had such mastery of all aspects of Dikduk in the Hebrew language. And they said, how do you do that? You spend all your time learning Gemara and Shas and Poskim. He said, I'll give you a mashal. He said, a man is looking around to get into some kind of business, and he's looking through the window of a shoe store. And he sees a man buy some shoes, and he asks the owner, how much does it cost? And he says, $20. And he says, okay, gives the man $20, and the man takes a box and puts the shoes in and wraps it up with string. And he says, wow, I got an idea. So he walks into the store, and he says, I would like, about 500 boxes and, about, 1,000 meters of string. He says, well, this is a shoe store. I don't really do that. I mean, I have some in stock if you want to buy it off me. He says, why buy it off you? You just gave it to that other guy for free. He said, understand. He said, he bought shoes. If you buy shoes, you get the string in the box for free. If all you want is the box and string, you're going to have to pay for it. He says, the person who's involved in Torah, he says, I got the dikduk along with it. I got the understanding. You only want to focus on that, that's what you have. So Bloch said, in other words, it became also because they approached it with an idea of a scientific study of Tanakh or such. So therefore, in the yeshivas, they backed off learning Tanakh. The extent that Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, who spent a lot of time both on dikduk, he was a master of the Lashon and on Tanakh, said when he was learning in Slobodka, some people looked at him funny a bit. You're learning Tanakh? Right? He said, that's ridiculous that it was taken away. The Lashon HaKodesh is meant to be a Lashon of Kedusha. And people stepping back because it was used as like almost a banner for let's abandon the Gullus mentality and return to, being true Israelis without, all that religion stuff or things, so people backed off on that. And our excitement and yearning for Eretz Yisrael, which is central to Torah, right? People started saying, because other people were, again, utilizing that as a banner for separating off, so people dropped it entirely. Okay, so that's the idea, that you have to realize that these things, we have to reclaim those things as huge, infinite parts of what Am Yisrael are. I always remember two quotes just from Shapira, very Shekter's itself. He said the following. Two different stories, two different incidents. It was sometimes I would go to his house for Shabbos Suda. I went almost every week for Shabbos Sudas, but sometimes I would go for the Suda in the day. They were very long Sudas with no chit-chat. In between courses, so he would take out a Chumash, and he'd read Chumash and Rashi, and then you could ask him a question. There was a guy who used to like to get him worked up a bit to make it more interesting. So it was Shabbos Gracious, and he's reading the beginning, Gan Eden, about the Nachash. So this young man asked him, he said, and asked him a Shiva question, he said, we know that in order to pronounce words, you need a certain shape of mouth and palate and tongue and teeth. A snake doesn't have that, so how could the snake talk? So the Shiva calmly flipped to the Ramban. The Ramban explains that the Nachash is this Nachash Kadmon, right? This Nachash Elyon, this force, this powerful spiritual force, which is described as a Nachash. So the guy said, I guess that means I'm not getting an answer. There he got upset with him. He says, why do you have to take things which are vast and grand and shrink them to the confines of your small mind? Right? Meaning that you have to approach the Torah in that way as it is. Similarly, we used to learn in his house, Motzai Shabbos, he would go through the writings of his Rebbe Rav Hutner, Sefer Pachad Yitzchak. He'd go through very slowly, explaining it. And there was one young man, a brilliant guy, but very practical kind of guy. He came over, he said, after we spent 2 hours learning something very lofty and deep, he said, I'd like to ask the Rosh Hashiva, practically, what am I supposed to get out of this? So he paused. He says, I'm going to tell you something. I don't want you to respond. I just want you to think about it. He said, there's more to life than cornflakes and milk. Right? Meaning, right? Torah isn't meant to be turned into cornflakes and milk. You're right. You're seeing things in Torah that are vast, that are grand, that are huge. That's because Torah is an entirely different way of life. It's revealing to us the true inner workings of the world, and that's what we're receiving in Matan Torah. That's why Matan Torah was done in the way that it was done. It was not just simply handing out pamphlets. It was a life-changing experience, this experience of Nevuah, and that is where the conflict happened with the Tzaddukim. The Tzaddukim wanted the day of Matan Torah to be a long weekend day. That's what it is. The Torah is here to enhance our lives, right? Get with it. Chazal say no. It's true. Sometimes the Torah will tell us to do something. It doesn't seem to make sense in terms of Olam Hazeh. You're on the way to Eretz Yisrael. Just got a few days to go. Oh, now go around the desert for 40 years. It may not make sense according to your system, but according to the Torah system, that's exactly what it has to be. So therefore, this aspect of Sefiras Omer in this argument is key to the way we approach Shavuos and to what we're doing. We're supposed to open up our minds to that which is far above us, but is also inside of us. Wishing everyone a wonderful